that correct?
That's correct. We will have them for next time. It was a short turnaround since we met just last Wednesday.
There are warrants on the table, and do we have any line item transfers?
We do have some line item transfers, Dr. Berthing and the committee. I want to begin with some transfers from Mr. Londa. Actually, they're all from Mr. Londa's appropriations. And it's around heating costs, and I know this probably won't come as a surprise that we've been incurring a little higher amounts of heating costs this year than we had anticipated, given the winter that never seems to end that we're experiencing. So, Mr. Londa is requesting to transfer from several lines funds in order to make sure that there is enough in the natural gas line to cover the heating costs for all the schools. Beginning with the fuel oil line, $3,726. From maintenance of ground and supplies, $3,000. From fire safety and furniture repair, $4,733. And from electrical system supply, the good news is electricity, we're doing very good. And the change over to LEDs and other cost savings that have been implemented have resulted in some savings that we can now utilize to heat the buildings. So after all of those funds are transferred, the natural gas line, which started out at $150,000, will be increased to $176,459 from taking those available balances from the other lines. And the other area requesting to transfer $4,950 from the maintenance of building supply to dumping fees, and this is needed to cover the sewage costs for all schools. That line started at $53,000, and it will go down to $48,050 after we move that $4,950. The dumping fees started at $25,832 and are increasing to $30,782 with the transfer. And the final transfer from Mr. Londa's department is moving maintenance of building contract, $1,700, and this will be transferred to cover necessary repairs for the tractor and snow throwers for the district. To do some repairs there. That line for repair had started out at $2,620, and by moving this $1,700 will increase to $4,320. So those are the lines all within Mr. Londa's jurisdiction and maintenance responsibilities that we're requesting to move to take care of overruns in some lines with some available balances in other lines. Recommend approval of all of those.
Any questions about the transfer?
No. Is heat required for the schools?
I think for a few more days.
A few more days. I mean, it's going to be. Do you think we're going to have any more overages?
There's a lot of heat being generated in the buildings. The kids are very anxious. Our students, have been inside now for several days running, and so everybody's anxious to get outside and burn off some energy.
It does seem like it's going to continue, though, unfortunately. So we're probably going to take a hit on the budget
for a little bit longer.
A little bit longer,
yeah.
Huh? So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. And superintendent's report?
Yes, several items. First, I just wanted to begin by letting you know I'm receiving a text almost as we speak from Mr. Spadafino because our hockey team, is in the second game of the district tournament, and last Saturday we were up at the Wallace Civic Center, and they beat Grafton by a score of 4-0, and they're playing Worcester today. And after the first two periods, Lunenburg's ahead 3-1.
So, excellent.
It's been that's a joint team, that we have with the Air Shirley Regional School District, and they've had just a really stellar season, and I know when I was there on Saturday night watching the team play, it was a great crowd, a real lot of support there from the students as well as from the community, and I imagine a similar kind of event is going on, and a lot of support as well. So thanks to Mr. Spadafino for keeping us updated, and congratulations to the students and the coaches. They've really had a great season, and it continues, so we'll keep you posted. I wanted to let the committee and the community also know that we recently I worked with Mary Foyle, the president of the LEA, jointly on our Race to the Top grant. We had some funds that had not been expended over the last 2 years of the grant. While we were following the project, outlined some of the areas that we had initially put some funds in, thinking that we'd have costs there, have actually been offered free from the state, and so we didn't incur those costs, and we were able to take those funds and move them to different areas. So we've also been able to train 5 out of our 6 building administrators, either principals or assistant principals, through this grant, affording them the opportunity to attend a 2-year training for building-based administrators from it's called the NISL program. It's the National School Leadership Program, just a really outstanding program that has cohorts of other individuals who are principals or assistant principals in buildings around the area and around the state. So it was a great opportunity for our principals and assistant principals to receive a well-documented training program that is a nationally recognized program, as well as to give them an opportunity to work with and network with their job-alike peers out there. So that's been absolutely outstanding. A lot of this money in this grant we have utilized in order to provide time for our teachers during the summer in particular to work on curriculum, to make sure that our curriculum is moving to being consistent and aligned with the Common Core of standards within the state, as well as those are national standards, I think you're all aware. And we'll do a lot more of that work. I think there's approximately $16,000 that's available for our staff to continue to do that work and focus in that alignment area. We've been concentrating at this point in time with mathematics as well as English language arts, and we'll continue to do that work this summer by making these funds will continue to be available. In doing this amendment, we also received an extension so we can have until September to expend the remaining funds. We also have formed some work groups, and those were consistent with the grant to begin with, and that particular part of the grant that we have the work groups will be connected to the educator evaluation model, and continuing to work together on that implementation of that new model, and having resources available to assist our staff in understanding that model and the kinds of evidence and artifacts that they collect in support of the work that they're doing, as well as just the timelines around the new processes. And with that, we work cooperatively with the LEA in terms of addressing areas if there are any questions or concerns or a need for additional training and understanding. And so we're looking forward to doing that work with a group from our Teachers Association, as well as what we refer to as DDMs, which are district determined measures. And district determined measures is another area that we will be working closely and talking with the LEA about how that looks in our district. The administrative team has watched a couple of the webinars that are available that were developed by the state. All of this information really is up at on the DESE website, and anybody can access it and learn more about these measures. But district determined measures really are designed to play a very key role in the new educator evaluation framework, and they're common measures that go across grade levels across the district that are utilized to determine student impact, learning impact, and they're related to growth. Now, one part of the district-determined measures is that every teacher will have 2 of those that are incorporated into an impact statement. However, the mandate under the state model and the language of the regulations is that if a teacher teaches in an area where the state has assessment and there is growth information available, that information must be one of the 2 measures that's utilized. So our staff have been working, we have been doing common assessments. We've developed common assessments as part of our development of understanding by design through a backward design model for over 8 years now, with the leadership of our former curriculum director, Karen Martin, did a lot of training. Our current, one of our master teachers, Mr. Tim Shaysgreen, who teaches over at Turkey Hill Middle School, has picked that up because Mr. Shaysgreen also is an instructor at Fitchburg State University and has taught understanding by design, and he has continued that as part of our his master teacher program, and he is in charge of the mentoring program for new educators to our district as well. So all of that links together really to create that comprehensive model that's available under this new design. Tomorrow, all the administrative team and myself will be working with a consultant. We've worked with a consultant since the beginning of the year, Beth Graham, and Beth has been working and assisting us in terms of looking at classrooms and making sure we're consistent in terms of how our various administrators are looking at classrooms with regard to the standards that are there. And we're going to be doing some instructional rounds tomorrow. Mrs. Behosh and I will be in all 3 schools with Beth Graham and then the principal and assistant principal. And our staff have just been really outstanding in terms of inviting us in. We ask, because, 5 adults walking into your classroom can be perhaps disruptive, hopefully not, in terms of the work that we're doing, but it's a large group. It's a larger group than we typically have doing instructional rounds. And I just really appreciate the willingness of all our educators to open up their classrooms for this activity, and really am looking forward to it tomorrow. The last piece of information, there's actually 2 more pieces of information that I wanted to share, is the state, through their Race to the Top funds, has set up a comprehensive system of teaching and learning, a platform. It's a technology application platform that's available to do analytics as well as to be a storehouse for curriculum and assessments that are locally designed or aligned. And that particular platform, we've been participating in a series of webinars as well to learn to utilize that platform. That is a really exciting opportunity that's being made available by the state. The downside of it is that it's in existence only for a couple years at no cost under its current configuration when we've asked about its longevity because of the federal dollars being utilized in its development. It's our understanding that at some point in time there may be a charge that will be required for districts to be able to use the full extent of that. So that's one of the areas that I know we've mentioned to our legislators as well as the DESE because it is a very strong platform. It has the potential to do things that a lot of packages that are on the market right now, it probably does more than a lot of those packages that are out there that are fairly expensive packages. So we're hopeful that the state will be able to continue to work with the company ThinkGate is the vendor for it at this particular time, and maybe keep those costs down by having large numbers of districts participate in it. So we'll keep you posted on that effort. So we've been very, very busy, not only with the day-to-day operation of the schools, but really with several new initiatives, many of them connected with the Race to the Top initiative. I wanted to let you know also, as in conjunction with the Race to the Top funds, about $1,000 of that will be utilized in conjunction with another grant from the state to put in place interoperability between our student information and teacher information system and that of the states. And what that will provide us is much better and smoother reporting to the state of information, because it will happen on a daily basis. Currently, through the various 85 or more kinds of elements that we report data to the state on, that happens on about a quarterly basis. And if there are errors in any of those fields, then it gets kicked back and we have to go in and scrub the data and find out what's not jiving, what's not in the appropriate format. And that's a pretty time-consuming task because with the current system, obviously data error entry is a potential. It just happens when you're putting that much information into a system. And so this particular system will allow us to have that more direct feedback with smaller chunks of new information, and we see it as really expediting the reporting process that happens so many times a year. Our data manager, Carrie Cooper, works with the building administrative assistants in each one of the buildings to make sure that data is entered and maintained in the appropriate fashion. So that will be a good thing to have accomplished as well in terms of the overall operation of the district around a reporting area that's important to us because of so many of the fiscal formulas are driven by that data that we're reporting and when we're reporting it. So we'll look forward to that piece being done. It's been about 2 years in coming right now. I also wanted to let everyone know that they've asked us to refresh the student information and make sure that we have in the system clear indications of any of our students who are aligned with military families. That was a particular push that they said, we're not sure that everybody's getting this information in there, and we ask that you send out a request and just make sure that military families identify themselves on that reporting, because the state asks for that as part of the student information system. So we've developed a PDF file that parents can update any of their information that's right now in our Student Information Center, which is a nice opportunity, and that it can be done rather than filling out a form by hand. At least this PDF will go out and people can enter the information and submit it in that fashion. So we're just wanting to get the word out about that, and I'll be putting that out in the superintendent's update that'll probably come out at the end of this week. Unfortunately, we'll also be sending out some letters here shortly around our our school lunch program. At the current time, we'll send letters to families who have more than $25 deficit. Now, families get regular updates on that, but at the current time, we're about $6,500 in deficit relative to collected fees for school lunches, and so we're going to put out a request to the families. They receive it via email on a weekly basis, but we'll send a letter out asking the families to please make sure that they take care of those balances. And at the same time, we'll also make sure that any families that may need to fill out a request for assistance have that available to them as well. So that's what's happening in the district right now. Thank you.
Superintendent, may I ask a quick question? It's also available via Power School app, isn't it? How much you owe? Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to point that out to people on TV, because I'm
It
looking
does.
at making sure that I'm not one of those parents who owes money. But anybody who has either an Android device or an iPhone, you all have the ability to go to either Google Play Store or the iTunes Store, download Power School, and it allows you to see a lot of information that is helpful, depending on the grades that your child is in, and also this information. So Power School on Google Play or iTunes. You checking it out too?
I am.
I figured you were.
Thank you.
School building report, Mr. Mackin?
Yes, the work group met today for a number of hours. The areas that we were looking at were landscape design. We spent some time talking about that and how the fields will be going in and what the schedules will be looking like. What we expect to see out of that is that by the beginning of July, we believe we'll start to see the early package work being done. By that I mean we're breaking out a certain piece of the work and bidding that early in order to get it started in July, and that surrounds the clearing of the current football and practice fields and getting it ready for the construction vehicles and creating the new cut into Oak Avenue. And in addition, during that early phase, we're going to put in the new practice field, which will come off of Massachusetts Avenue. And that will relieve some pressure while the other two fields will be really out of service until as long as 2016. Then after that, there was a meeting that also included the structural engineers, the electrical engineering, the plumbing engineering, and that was done in conjunction with all of the regulatory offices in town. And so we had police, fire, conservation, planning, building, to review the plans and to see, to give input. And I think it was a very productive back and forth. And I think that there'll be a fairly smooth process of review. There will be a site plan review by the planning committee, but it's not, if you will, a formal review because it's not required under the statute. But we think it's just good to have another set of eyes. And the next school building committee meeting is next Wednesday, the 12th at 6:30 at Thomas C. Passios.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Okay, in old business, we have a discussion of the FY15 budget.
Yes, Dr. Berthium, I just wanted to point out to the committee, we continue, the school budget continues to be a fairly dynamic document, and I know the school committee is planning some workshops as well around some of the goals that you set. In this document, we're still showing over a 7% increase, and the town manager in the recommended budget at this point in time, a 3.5% increase is what's slated for the schools. We have been keeping this updated because we've had some additions, and we've had some additional costs that I've incorporated into this, but we've also had some changes based upon some retirements that weren't incorporated into the budget. And so we're going to continue to work with this particular, the budget hearing will be April 2nd. It'll be here in this room. It will be our annual budget meeting, and we'll go over in pretty fine detail the drivers. And I think by that point in time, perhaps the committee will have had their workshops and give us more input into this, because I made some assumptions based upon some of the goals that the committee had. For example, the transportation in this document assumes no fee next year, and that's about a $30,000 assumption. And those kinds of things are things that I will need specific guidance on in terms of whether to continue to carry them. When we put it together, because of the timing of when I'm responsible for having a recommended budget to you, I felt that it was best to include it as opposed to not include it. And so we can make those final adjustments. But our budget hearing will be April 2nd, and then I'll be presenting to the FinCom, I believe on the 20th of March is the presentation of the school budget to the FinCom. And I'm not sure where we'll be with regard to the workshops at that point in time, but we can highlight highlight those areas for everyone at that point in time. So we'll keep this going. I think one of the biggest challenges, and it's always a dynamic area, and I say this as a point of reference and not as a point of judgment, is we know that we've had a couple more special education placements. I know that in this iteration I added another 200,000 to the private tuition line. The state does provide some assistance for special education placements. You know, that amount that's calculated, that's 4 times the per pupil expenditure, 75 or up to 78% of that we get reimbursement. But that's the year after it's been spent. And so a new placement that the first year that it's in there is not calculated into your reimbursement rate. And so those are things that we'll continue to work through. I know that Ms. Behush and our special educators, our administrative team, we're working hard to look at programs that we can make available here. It's been about 13 years ago now that we undertook a pretty substantial effort to make sure that we develop programs here in the district to meet the needs of our students. Those programs continue to serve many, many students across our district. Those are the programs that we are substantially separate programs. We call them our Achieve programs. And that made a very significant difference. We're seeing a need for some supports to students, probably in the social-emotional areas, I think, where we're seeing the need the most at this point in time. We've talked about this in the past and looking for avenues, particularly at the high school level. I think at this point in time is where we're feeling the greatest pressure to bring on staff and services. But that's a tricky proposition in terms of how you make that investment in order to provide those services and return students to the district that are currently in out of district placements, but also provide an option rather than students needing to go out of the district. So Ms. Behush, I think, is going to talk a little bit about some initial steps we're taking to do that in conjunction with her report today on the coordinated program review. And we'll continue to develop that as we move forward and have more information about that, hopefully for our for this year's budget as well, to look at some options that we might want to consider. So I really don't need to go into a whole lot of additional detail. We're going through the final numbers. We're trying to make sure that if there's anything even vaguely on the horizon, that we're incorporating it in, and we'll be looking forward to being able to have thorough reporting and transparency around our budget that we pride ourselves in, and hope that a lot of people join us for that hearing on April 2nd. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Any questions on the budget at the moment?
I just, on the you probably saw my reaction to additional money being spent on special ed. I mean, we're going to reach our breaking point with this. I mean, I look at the percentage of our budget that is now going towards that. Finding a way to reduce that cost while meeting the needs, we've got to find a way, because it is sucking the budget out of town, unfortunately, right? And which is taking away from other students as well. And we got to help everybody, but finding a way to maximize what we do for the kids, all kids, right? Mm-hmm. Cost effectively. A $200,000 addition is just sort of a shot to the arm, right? So I mean, whatever we can do to figure that out is really important. It's critical, and I feel pretty strongly about that.
Right. I think we have struggled to do our best for the past many years. Would really be great if the Commonwealth would pay a little bit of attention to the way that special education is funded. Because I think it's not going to work for very much longer. If it's actually working now, that's arguable. So it would definitely be worth talking to your legislative delegation to see if they can think of other creative ways to fund special education costs.
Yeah. I know the increases during the year, there is the program of extraordinary relief, and even with the significant increases, that they feel significant to us. When you put them into the formula that the state uses for determining extraordinary relief, it seems to fall short of their proposal. So that year lag is very challenging relative to communities. And making sure that we're meeting the needs of all our students and providing real safe, responsive environments to everyone as well. So,
Okay, new business. We're up to the coordinated program review. Ms. Behosh, would you like to come up?
All right, so you all have your handouts. So the coordinated program review is an audit done by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education every 3 years, and it lags. For example, we went through this one last year in January. They came out and they did the full program review. Now in 3 more years, so in 2015-16, they'll do a mid-cycle, so it's kind of like a mini version, and then in 3 more years they'll be back to the full cycle again. So last year when Loxie was at the helm, they did the full review, which is great because I wasn't here yet. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and so I'm gonna just explain some of that to you so you can feel her pain that she went through last year doing all of these jobs together. And the results, I'm very excited about the results coming in board because the stuff that we need to work on is definitely doable, and it's nothing that is that glaring that can't be done in a short amount of time. So, like I said, they did come back in January. The process is that it takes them quite some time. So even though they were here last January in 2013, it took them until September 24th to issue their final report to us. So there is that lag in that time. So what is in the coordinated program review? The areas that they look at is they look at special education, they look at civil rights, and they also look at the English language, English learner education, ELL as well, we know it as too. And the scope of the coordinated program review, in each of those areas that they look at, for example, on slide 3, you'll see in special education, they looked at 59 indicators, 59 different areas they looked at just in special ed alone, that Loxie and the staff had to provide documentation for and show that they were meeting the regulations in those certain areas. In civil rights and other general ed requirements, there were 27 indicators, and in the English language, English learner education, there were 18 indicators. So it's a huge scope. The book's pretty thick. Each of the books are pretty thick, and they have you do it online now, which is a good thing. Back in the day, they had to do it all paper and would be having boxes upon boxes trucked back and forth from DESE. So about 7 or 8 years ago, they moved to online, which is freed up the process immensely, and now they don't want so much paperwork. You get to upload everything, which is still much better than boxes upon boxes, but still lots of paperwork, lots of time invested in it. So the components of the CPR, you can see on slide 4, there's 9 different components: assessment of students, student identification, parent community involvement. They survey parents in the community. They talk about curriculum instruction, they look at student support services, faculty, staff, and administration. They come in and do interviews. They check out the facilities, so they walk around all of the facilities and make sure that everything is copacetic to what they like. And sometimes they don't like what they see, which we did find in one area, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Then they look at how we evaluate our programs throughout the year, and then record keeping and fund use. So on slide 5, they break those elements down a little bit further. You can see exactly what they did when they came out. All of the staff that they interviewed over 33 teaching staff. They interviewed PACSAL representative, an ELE parent, and then some requests from persons from the general public. You can see all the documentations that they looked at. They'd come in and, I know in the past, I'm guessing they did the same thing here, but they'll come in and then not only look in the special ed office, but they might go to the super's office and look for documentation, ask for additional documentation. When they come in, they'll look at your manuals, your PD plans. They'll look at student records. So they'll have us pull a certain amount of records and a good representation out of district, in district, inclusion, sub-separate programming, related services. They ask for a full gamut of that. And then they also do the same thing for English language learner files as well. And then the surveys that they survey parents with students with disabilities. They also survey parents of English learners. And you can see here that of the surveys, they had a 27.4 response rate from special ed parents and a 17.6 response rate from ELE families on that. So we can work on that next time, hopefully. We can get more of the word out. That's still a good survey response rate, but I'd like to see it higher. But again, it was still nice to see that we had that many participate, because it is a pretty lengthy survey that they do on that. And then they come in and they observe classrooms and other facilities, and so they did go around to each of the buildings and look at that.
Bless you.
Bless you. So on slide 6, what I did is I did a comparison breakout. When we get the report back, there's four criteria we can come up with. They either have that you've fully implemented one of the criterions, you've partially implemented, you've not implemented it at all, and then other criteria requiring response. So I've shown here over the last 3 coordinated program reviews how we've fared as far as areas that we needed to report on. And I didn't put the ones that were fully implemented. It's just all the others. So if you look at in special ed, you can see that we've actually improved from 2007 to 2013. In civil rights, the same thing. And in ELE, we haven't gotten the full report back. We got a preliminary report a couple of weeks ago that we were to look at and see if we have any glaring discrepancies with the report. I went over it with Cindy Rosenkrantz, our new ELE coordinator, and we didn't find any. So we'll wait now for the final report to come in, but that's why we're still waiting for the final report to come in that. I can tell you from the preliminary report, it looks like our biggest deficits and our hardest gaps to fill is going to be in the ELE area, much like it's different from special ed, where when I looked at the things that we had to partially implement to correct, those are going to be pretty routine. I can take care of those, not a problem. I can talk with staff, I can talk with principals, I can talk with Loxie and figure out stuff. In the ELE category, we're looking at some time requirements that we're not meeting right now. Over the summer, we had about 6 to 7 new students move in into the district that were English language learners, and most of them were, they call it step 1, I believe, level one, which means that they have to meet certain requirements, and I believe it's up to like 2 hours or 2.5 hours a day of ELE instruction. Our person right now is only half-time, and she's full district-wide. So although she's been able to help keep up, and the staff has been phenomenal this year. Even when Cindy came on board, she goes, I can't believe it. She goes, it's so great to be able to walk up and go through the buildings, and the teachers come up and, what can I do? I've got this student in my class and I want to help him out. And so it's not a, you need to fix it, Cindy type of thing. The teachers are really invested in having these students in their class, and that's just so great to be able to hear as an administrator, and for Cindy to be able to confirm with her going out in the classrooms and seeing the same thing across the board. That being said, we will need to meet the requirements. So what I've asked Cindy to do from now until we get the final report is to go through and for her to log her time, log those students and what levels they are, and what she is seeing the requirements as being as the number of minutes she needs to meet. And then to project those students out over the next couple of years, and also project out, because every year we test them informally, so to speak, with the tests that they give to see what levels they're at for the next year. So a student may jump from a level 1 to a level 3, or they may stay at a level 1 for a couple of years, depending on their acquisition of the language. So Cindy has got a pretty good handle on them right now, so she's going to be making those guesstimates for us, so we can look at next year, right, how many of the level 1s are still level 1s and are going to need that intensive 2 to 2.5 hours a day services, so that we can better plan. And so I'll be looking forward to getting that from her over the next couple of weeks. Then when we get the report back and see where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, from DESE and meeting those requirements, I'll be reporting back to Loxie, who will probably be reporting to you all on and what that means to us. So with that, points to recognize. The things that they did in looking at the comparisons is that we have shown improvement across the board in special ed and civil rights over from 07 to 13. And then given all that's been added, that's the other thing that it doesn't come out in the report, but if you've been in education a while, you know that since even 2000, the demands that have been placed on districts since that time, No Child Left Behind and everything else that's come along, all of the unfunded mandates, all of the things that teachers have to do, MCAS and now PARC and everything else, it's building and building and building. So to think about the fact that we're in full compliance with 91% of our areas is huge, given everything else that teachers have to do. nowadays. And so I just wanted to recognize that and the staff for that. Because that's definitely a group effort, and it's not only the staff, but it's administration, families, and the communities. We should all be very proud of that fact, that we're in compliance as much as we are, given everything that's required of us. Corrective action is needed in the following areas. So procedurally, copies of the IEPs. They want us to start mailing out 2 complete copies of the IEPs, including 2 signature pages and 2 placement pages. That's different in the fact of before we'd send out 1 complete copy of the IEP, and then we'd send out 2 signature pages and 2 placement pages. Now we have to send out 2 complete copies, and Loxie's heard my spiel on this. What it amounts to is it's going to be a lot more paper, and it's going to be a lot more mailings. When I came on board here, I had my little form up. I tried to move towards electronic devices and electronic signatures and have that as a requirement. I went to bat 3 times to the state with them and fought them on it, and I got nailed down because there's nothing in the regulations that say that we can send it electronically, even if parents want that and request that. We can't accept that. We have to send 2 complete copies. So that's something that it's a battle I did not win, and I'm not willing to spend our legal fees
thank you for trying.
to fight the state on it. But I will continue to bring it up. I brought it up to ACE, a member of the ACE Executive Board, the Administrators for Special Education. So I'm bringing it up to the top level in that arena, and I will continue to take charge of what I feel is not the best use of our funds. Especially when parents don't necessarily want to wallpaper their walls with 50 pages in an envelope to them.
Quick question, why 2 copies? Just curious, why 2 copies?
The state feels that their response to me when I asked them that is they expect the parents to actually mail a copy back to us for us to have for our records. And I told them that I didn't feel that I needed to have that for my records, that we had a record already in there. And they said that the regulations don't provide for us to excuse ourselves from giving that second copy. At least they didn't ask us to give a stamped, self-addressed envelope. So we don't have to do that at this point.
There are no regulations about breathing oxygen either, but I seem to do that every day. But thank you for answering that, because I was just curious, because it seemed a little strange.
It is one of those points with me, it's like, really?
Yeah, and to second what Todd said, appreciate you going to bat, trying to improve the process, because ultimately you're trying to help Superintendent Comms, yourself, and really the parents too, because I think you're right. They don't want to wallpaper their place, so I really appreciate you doing that.
And the parents that do want it, I am more than happy to give them as many copies as they need. But the ones that don't, the ones that want it electronically, because quite frankly, sometimes it's a lot easier to keep it electronically
absolutely.
than it is, and to be able to access it wherever you may be.
So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, and I will continue that little charge.
Ms. Bajaj, is that, do they say that's in regulation or in law?
It's in the regulations.
It's in regulation, so it's a regulatory requirement that could be altered by the regulatory body.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Just again, if we're advocating with our legislative folks, this is an area that we might want to focus on.
It is, and like I said, it comes down to the mailing costs and the printing costs, and even the copy machines. It's the amount of copies. It doesn't make sense.
We have the capacity to do it otherwise. There's a special program that we've invested in several years ago now to help with processing of all this information that's specific to special education. And the technology exists to do it.
Right. Through eSped, our IEP program, I have the ability to be able to send all of this paperwork encrypted to the parents with password generated access. So it's safe.
And we'll definitely go to our legislators and see if we can bring Massachusetts into the 18th century versus the 17th century.
Thank you.
And I did just go on the public record saying that, and I do want that noted. That's incredible. Appreciate all your hard work on that. Really appreciate it.
The next one that came on board was translations. They weren't finding consistently when they looked at our ELE records that evaluations and progress reports were translated in the second language. That's an easy fix. I looked at our procedures for it. I put some things in place, and a lot of times what happens, it's not because of anyone not wanting to do it. It's just one of those things that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. You translate the IEP, you make sure that there's a translator at the meeting, but then sometimes all of the additional paperwork that comes afterwards just it just gets lost in the file, so to speak. So I've put something in place now to where that won't be an issue. When we have someone noted, it's going to be noted through eSped, it's going to be noted in the file, and the secretary in the office knows that that stuff gets sent out to be translated. So that's an easy fix on that. Mandates, there were 3 mandates that we needed to look at. Special education training has to happen every year. So I've done the training this year. I've moved to trying to do it online with a follow-up face-to-face meeting at staff meetings, because a lot of times we have so many veteran staff here, for them to hear a 1 or 2 hour presentation on special ed laws and regulations. They've heard it before, and they've been to so many team meetings, they know what the rights are and what they need to do. So what I've tried to streamline it so that we can better use their time in the classroom and other professional development opportunities. But like I said, for this one, I did go into the faculty meetings after and asked if anyone had any questions, and then I was able to follow up that way. So I think that's a much better use of time. And I've talked with Loxie too about some of our other mandated trainings that happen every year to try to do the same thing. And I've also uploaded them on the Special Services website, so anyone can see the training that's been done, and that it would be accessed there. And I told all the staff that it's there for them to go look at again if they want to peruse it and have fun nighttime reading and surfing on that. The other one was the program review of special ed. We're required to review special education every year. So last year the CPR counted on that, but this year we need to review our programs again. I've used a consultant in the past, Sharon Fauscher. I know that she's also been used in this district in the past. I've already contacted her. We've set up a schedule for the next 3 years on programs that are going to be evaluated. She's going to come in and do some surveys, some interviews, and look at certain areas and help us. Tell us what we're doing great and what we could tweak to make a little bit better. It's great to have her come in because she's got that third eye that comes on board, and so she knows what's going on in the state, because this is the only thing she does is she goes around and she'll do PD and then she'll do program reviews. So she sees what's going on in other districts. So it's great to have those things to be able to bounce off, or hey, you're going to look at this program this year, what are other districts doing? Are we that far off the mark? Is somebody doing it differently? What's new and approved? So it'll be good to have her come out and do that. And then the other area we needed to do was the K-12 programs, to make sure that we were meeting all of the regulations on that, all of our programs met all of the civil rights responsibilities, all the diversity and everything else, and Loxie's working on that criteria now. And the last area were the location of services. At the primary school, they did not like some of the setups from where special education students were being serviced in some small groups in the big common area. What I tried to point out to them, and what Jill has pointed out on numerous occasions, is that not only special ed students receive services in that big common area, but regular education students receive services in that area. Title I students receive, everybody receives services in those areas. We went back and forth 2 to 3 times on that one, and even if we showed them that there was equity, with schedules, they do not want to see any special education students being serviced in a common area. They want them in their classrooms or in other areas, not in hallways, what they consider hallways, even though it's really not a hallway. It's just the design of the building and how it was to utilize the space. So we've had to do a statement of assurance saying that special education students would not be serviced in that common area any longer. And Turkey Hill Middle School, they did not like the setup for the speech and language, they had said, area, that they were more than 2 groups going on in a room at a time for acoustic reasons, and so we've corrected that as well at Turkey Hill Middle School. So those were the corrective action areas that we're working on for that. And we had a March progress report that I had to submit, so I just submitted that and got that back, and then we'll have to report again in June. And by the end of June, everything should be all taken care of, and then we're looking forward on to 2015-16 when we have our mid-cycle. At the mid-cycle, they'll come back and they'll highlight any new areas that have come on board, new regulations, new requirements. They'll make sure we're intact with that, and then they'll look back usually at these areas again to make sure that we're still in compliance with these, is generally how a mid-cycle works out.
Question on the education in the common areas. Did they give a reason why? Just they didn't, or just 'cause?
It's what they don't want is they don't want special education students singled out. They don't want them serviced in hallway areas, and that's always been a big thing with them. And they could not move past the fact that they felt that that was a hallway area and not a common area. And then I don't understand their reasoning for why they don't feel that, well, then why are any students being service
that
there.
was
Except
my
that they
next
can't
question.
tell us what we can do with our general education population and our ELL population.
Because
So
technically
they might want to, but they can't, so.
Because technically then all of our students are being singled out, so to speak, because they're all being
Absolutely.
educated there. We're
Absolutely.
treating everybody the same.
And
That's
I've been over there and I've
interesting.
witnessed it. And if that was going on, and I would have an issue with it, but it's
Okay.
not. It's
Okay.
not. There is good programming going on, and sometimes it makes sense to pull a couple of kids out in that common area
Yep.
than keep them in a class of
Okay.
22 or 23
So just
students.
it's a little bit of building design too, as you pointed out, and it's interpretation.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for explaining.
So up to slide 9 now. Like I said there, the corrective action plan, we submitted, approved it in November 2013. We have 1 year to complete. They'll all be done by this June, and we're currently still on target to meet those. And the description of the activities, we have to tell them who's going to be responsible for implementing them. In the most part, it's myself. Loxie is in one area as well. We have to give them the expected date of completion. We have to give them a narrative description, evidence of completion. So when I upload the documents, I have to give them not only what we're doing, but I have to show them evidence that it's been done. And then description of internal monitoring procedures to make sure that they're followed through. And then I've already talked about mid-cycle and how it's a smaller, more focused area of review, and that'll be in a couple of years. And so from that, again, I just want to thank everyone for all of the hard work they did, and just to commend them for a phenomenal job going through a full CPR last year. It's tough, but I think it was great results. Great results. And so from that too, it leads me to, Loxie had mentioned some of the changes that I'm looking at and some of the things that I'm trying to push forward to help expand the programs. One of them is with our 18 to 22-year-old ACE program, and I've been in contact with the state about moving that program. I've gotten some thoughts from Laura Rudy, the teacher who just retired from that program, who'd been in that, teaching in that program for quite a few years. And she had said, I love the program's great, but being over in the high school, it doesn't afford the kids the opportunity to really have a work-type environment, to really work on those 18 to 22-year-old skills. We're having to walk over to your office to do all of the filing, and it would be really great if we had a room that's more conducive to a workplace environment rather than a school. The other thing that I've noted from my previous jobs as well is that it's hard for students when they work so hard and they graduate from a school to then have to turn around and go back for 4 years. And some of them get stuck. They can't understand, I graduated, I'm done, why do I have to come back here? They want to move on. They want to grow, they want to have a new experience from that. So I had talked with Loxie and got the go-ahead to start looking at it through DESE. And what I have to do is we have to create our own day program. So it's going to be a day program, which means I have to go through many little steps. No, not little, but many steps to get day program approval by the state. They've already come out and they've told me that I need to have some like 6 or 7 of them done to get preliminary approval before I can move the program, and then I can spend a few months to work on getting all of that other information together. Again, I think it's more going to be fact gathering and getting all together. It's just going to take time. Kim Jones, who's our new ACE teacher, is very invested in this. She's very excited about the thought of moving it, and so she's been helping out too with that. But the thought is to move it over to TCP. We're thinking of one of the rooms down on the superintendent's wing right now, one of the outer rooms. I think it's 16 is what we're thinking of preliminarily right now. They came, they loved it, they thought it was great. Kim went in and she goes, oh, this would be so great. She was thinking of a work area and a little home-based area so that we could really teach kids life skills and then have an office space and then to be able to have them more in the community. They're still going to be connected to the high school. They're still going to have to go over for lunches. They're still going to be able to go over and maybe do some jobs at the high school as well, and to pair up with probably Best Buddies or some other students as needed and as what makes sense with them. But I would like to create a program for them so that they feel like they've graduated and they've moved on. So that's our process. With that, the thought would be we'd open up a classroom then at the high school to start thinking about a mental health program, a social emotional, something to help on that end of it, because we do have a high population of students who are needing more support than what we have to offer right now. And we need space. That's the main problem with starting programs. They say if you have 2 or 3 students, you can create a program and it can be cost effective with just 2 or 3. it's getting that money up front to do that, but it's also space. That usually is the biggest inhibitor of starting these programs, because there's generally no space. And if you've been at the high school, you know that every space is utilized to the max. So I talked with Brian and I've talked with Loxie about, if I'm able to move ACE program out, which we wanted to do anyways, could we utilize that classroom for something if we have the budgetary allotment to be able to then pull something together and really create a worthwhile program so that we don't have to worry about some of the placements. Although the placements that went out recently were not, this program being in place or not would not have changed that result. But it definitely would help us in the future, and I think it would help the whole student body to be able to have that kind of program and those kind of services at the high school. And not just for those kids that are going to be outplaced, but for all of the kids, like you had said, to really take advantage and to really build up the high school's program and the support for that. Because the guidance counselors are very stretched, and they don't necessarily have the support and the time to be able to work as a mental health counselor, as a social work, as a school adjustment counselor, that is needed, I believe, up there for right now for some of our higher risk students. And the students coming back that are in hospitalizations, rather than coming back from hospitalization and being plopped right back into their full class load, to be able to ease them back in so that they can be successful and so that they have that support. So those are some things that are on the horizon that I'll be coming to you about later. But the ACE program right now, we're in the process of starting that transition, and I'm very excited about it. Kim is very excited about it. And it's a great time for the students too, because right now we're at a little bit of a dip. One of our students is aging out this summer. So before we have 4 or 5 more students come over from the Achieve program, we'll be able to really get that program started up and in place before we can have that. And with it being a day program, we also have the ability later on down the line to tuition students in if needed and if we have the capacity for it. Any questions?
Any other questions?
Just a couple of questions and comment on the day program. Now, the day program would still be under DESE. It wouldn't have a separate certification of any sort from another body, would it?
No, it would still be under DESE.
Okay.
But it would be a day program, would have a code. So it's a day program as under public school.
Okay. And of course, we realize that the use of the TCP is a temporary thing for 2 or 3, until we can predict what happens next.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I'm big on changing when we need to change and moving along with, we'll see when the time comes and we have to move, we need to move. These kids are here from 18 to 22, so when you think about 2 or 3 years, for some of those kids, that's the majority of their time in there. So we're not looking at something that's more like a K through 6 age span. We're looking at 4 years, so.
And without that move, the second move in terms of the other program that we've demonstrated such a high level of need around is not even an option for us. So we understand the challenge of TCP and that building no longer being a school, but we feel that we have that time to figure out the next best location.
And I've talked to the teacher about that too, and she understands that as well, and she's still fine with it, which is great.
I guess I bring it up only because if it's something that needs some thought in terms of the new building, ultimately, we ought to be having that discussion.
And I can talk with Loxie too about the new spaces in the building too, yep. But then we get back to the fact that they'd be back in the high school, and I'd like them someplace else, if we could. Yeah. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have our first reading of the 3000 series policy.
Yes, sorry. I need to pull out my iPad, which needed charged. And while I work that device, I'm going to work my other device and let you know that the hockey team won 3-2.
Yay!
We'll move on to the finals on Monday night. It'll be at the Wallace Civic Center again, 6 o'clock on Monday, so.
What level of finals is that? Is that finals and then they go, is it regional finals? District finals,
yep.
Against 2.
I don't have that yet. I think that must be dependent upon another game.
Skates and sticks.
So.
Well, if Team USA can't pull it off and we have to lose to Canada, then take Lunenburg.
The section that was up for review, we always review one section of policy each year, the policy subcommittee, as well as looking at additional or new policies that may be required in any setting. But this year, section 3000, which is fiscal management and non-instructional operations, was the policy section that was under review. Dr. Berthium and Mr. Blake are part of the policy subcommittee, and we were able to meet. What we have done is done some language changes in some of these policies just so they read more specifically and directive. There was some language that seemed more like suggestions instead of this shall be done, and we fixed that language. We also, with regard to student activity accounts, put in language around the student activity accounts. It was listed by building before, how much each building would have, and obviously that has a tendency to not necessarily remain the same if you change your configuration. So the amounts will stay the same. Lunenburg High School will be allowed to carry a maximum balance in their their student activity checking account of $20,000, and that's because of the number of activities that run through a student activity account, and those are all governed by both our local procedures and accounting, and audited on a regular basis, just like the other accounts are. But they do allow districts to have, for these student activities, the checking accounts in order for small purchases to be made directly, because for those clubs and activities, the regular procurement process isn't necessarily responsive enough time-wise to that. But there are restrictions about the amount that can be done through those checking accounts. Those are small purchases that are able to be done, and then they carry these balances in them. And everything ends up going back through the system in terms of making sure that there's that transparency and accounting of all the funds. So when funds are spent out of these checking accounts, those funds are reapplied through the policy, and you sign off warrants that then reimburse the checking accounts to fill that void. So all of that becomes very transparent. So Lunenburg High School at $20,000 and all other schools at $10,000. So the amounts remain the same. We just changed the language of how it was worded. This is the first reading of these policies. Policies go through 3 readings before they're adopted, and we seek public input on them. And they'll be posted by the end of this week up at our website, and I'll include that in my update as well as asking for input. We have a few more policies that we'll be bringing forward, probably the next school committee as well, to be addressed. The other large area in here that we've made some changes, I'm not going to go through a single one-word change that we've done. We did some clarification about the chief procurement officer and being also the purchasing agent. But we made consistent in this particular iteration of the new standards that we used in the most recent transportation bid. Those were more restrictive than what was in policy, and so we've moved those into policy. Those are our best practices. It talks about the age of buses and the number of miles that are allowed to be on the buses. Those kinds of things were updated, and those are reported out on a regular basis. On an annual basis, we check with that because we want to make sure that those those buses don't get to the level that they're constantly breaking down. We want good, dependable service. We also corrected in here, it said that fire drills would be done on a monthly basis. The standard is quarterly, so that was just updated to reflect the regulations, and I checked with Chief Sully on that just to make sure that that was consistent, and it was. We added some information around the senior citizen citizens privilege, because our senior citizens here in town are able to attend activities at no charge that is extended to them. During tournament times, we do ask that we know ahead of time, because of the way that the MIAA manages tournaments. We just need to have the information ahead of time rather than at the gate. But most of our activities, except for those tournaments, senior citizens only need to identify themselves and they're admitted to our events, be they competitive class plays or other kinds of events, without a charge. Also, we have updated facilities use. This language talked to a distant past when we had those wonderful shops and had all sorts of woodworking and other kinds of equipment in those shops that at times our teachers that in those programs were maybe doing adult classes. That's no longer part of our environment here, and so what we've put in there, and there was also some language that was pretty outdated around the use of the stage. 2 years ago, it's more than 2 years, it's more like 5 years ago, we had updated our facilities use procedures as well as the fees, and that's in section 1200 of our policy. So we reference in this section just the fact that we do assess, this committee assesses fees for facilities use and where to find that. So we deleted those other two large system sections about the stage use as well as the equipment in a shop environment that are outdated. And we also updated the language relative to free and reduced lunch and the procedures associated with that. So that's primarily the changes that we were made in this section. The changes are up, and we'll post this at the website for people to review and give us any commentary back. And we'll have 2 more readings before we move to make any changes. Thank you.
Make a motion to waive the first reading, since we had such an excellent cliff notes on it.
Any discussion, any thoughts? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. We have some donations.
We don't today.
Okay, so we'll unfortunately pass over the donations. Is there any public comment? Dave? Mr. Matthews?
Dave Matthews. Just as you're talking about the budget and you're talking about reaching out to the state delegation, state reps, looking at circuit breaker funding, I'd recommend you look at a bigger, broader concern with them. Education funding in general from the state is woefully lacking. A few years ago, we had an analyst, and I can't remember his name, who came in and went through all the ways that the state funding is calculated for towns, cities and towns. Years ago, 3 years ago, maybe 4. Time flies when you're getting old. And, the base of it was that they're sorely lacking, they're sorely behind where they should be. And if they close the gap to where they should be, we wouldn't have the issues we have locally. And a big driver in that is special education funding, but they don't fund that adequately. So never mind waiting a year, they're never funding it to begin with. So if we get that straightened out, as the state's enjoying revenue growth, wonderful revenue growth, and it's not coming back to us. The governor projected a minor increase to Chapter 70. It's nominal at best. It's a joke. And he's flatlining, non-school state aid. Also a joke. So as we lessen the funds coming into the town in general, that lessens the town's ability to direct town funds back to the schools. So it's a very cynical ploy to make it look like education's being more fully funded. But if you're taking away the other money in town, it's a wash at best. So, if you look at the town manager's proposed budget, net revenue increase to the town is about $688,000. I believe she's allocated $594,000 to the schools. Stop and think about that. That's kind of amazing that much is coming over. And I'm sure there'll be some pushback on that from different corners of town. So we really need the state to step up, fill these voids. We're still well behind where we were 5-6 years ago in state aid. We're well behind even further where we were in 2001, 2002. We're still woefully behind. So there's a lot of work our delegation needs to be doing for us. And I've reached out to the state senator, Senator Flanagan. She had expressed interest in trying to fight for state aid. I haven't gotten the same feedback from either of our state reps. Probably reach out to them. I would recommend, anything you guys can do, focus on holistically how they're funding schools. Because, we're lacking. And if you look at how Lunenburg gathers state funds, I mean, they pay, about 30% of our school budget? Maybe. I mean, the cities around us, they're getting 80, 90% funding. You look at our neighbors to the north, North Middlesex, I mean, they're talking about a $45 million budget, $46 million budget for 3,400 students. We're talking about, where are we at, 17? 17 million for about 1,700 students?
1638.
1638, so do the math. I mean, what you're doing, what the superintendent's doing, what the educators are doing with the funding, compared to what everyone else around us is doing, is phenomenal. But we need more from the state, so I would work that angle. Thanks.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Any other, yet? The public comment?
Yeah,
Okay.
just a couple of things. This Friday, 7 o'clock at the high school, the Lunenburg Boys and Girls Club is hosting a fundraiser game show, Are You Smarter Than Our Sixth Grader? It's at 7 o'clock at the high school. It's open to the public. It's a nominal charge to come in. There'll be teams of kids from the Boys and Girls Clubs and teams of other adults who will be competing with them for prizes and fun. And it will be recorded for later broadcasting on our wonderful Access folks. You're probably going to do it in your PTO report, so I won't report on that one, the fundraiser.
Okay.
And just a reminder that the town caucus is Monday, the 17th of March at 7 p.m. at the Turkey Hill Middle School.
Excellent. Okay. Reports. So FinCom met last week, and the town manager presented her recommended budget for the next year. As Mr. Matthews pointed out, there is we're all aware there's a discrepancy between what the town manager can provide and what we would need to maintain level service. This is a record we hear every year. And we're working on closing that gap. We will be meeting, Mrs. Collins will be presenting to the FinCom on the 20th of March, the budget, and then we'll have our budget hearing the first week in April. So there's a lot of financial work to be done over the next few months, few weeks anyway. Any school councils?
Nope.
Not since last week.
Okay. PTO?
They didn't meet since the last meeting either. PTO meets next Monday, but just while we're on TV, they are having an adult night out at the Harley House on Saturday, March 22nd, with dinner and a live band for $25 a ticket. And you can purchase tickets online at the PTO website.
Okay. Policy, Todd?
Nothing other than what what we just went through with the first reading of Section 3000, so
Great.
nothing else.
Capital planning? No. Let's see, wellness?
Meets next week, next Wednesday.
Paxo?
Their next meeting, their last one got snowed out, and is this Friday.
Okay. Acceptance and diversity was to have met last Thursday, but that got canceled so that Mrs. Combs, Mr. Mack, and Mr. Ebisol and I could all attend the FinCom meeting to hear about the budgets instead. So we'll be meeting tomorrow at TCP at 7 o'clock, if anyone would like to join us. Okay, items for future discussion. We do need to talk about workshops. I'm sorry.
Back up just for a second.
Sure.
If we could put back on the Building Reuse Committee.
Oh, yeah. we
My
do need to-
apologies.
Thanks, Mike.
You had asked for that. Yep.
We finally did that.
So we did meet on Monday, and it was an organizational meeting. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll add that back in. Okay, we do need to plan our workshops. 2 days that could work would be the 15th or the 22nd of March. Those are Saturday mornings. Do those work for anyone?
I'll have to get back. Go ahead.
You good?
I'll have to get back to you. I doubt it, but I'll have to get back to you on that
Okay.
for my schedule.
If we don't make one of those days, I think we're moving into early April.
I am not available on the 15th, but I am available on the 22nd.
Okay. You can email.
Yeah.
And we'll work that by email. Any other items for future discussion? Nope. Okay. So we do have need for an executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 23B, Paragraph 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Paraprofessionals Union and Lunenburg Educational Association, and we will not return to open session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's a roll call. Todd?
Aye.
Aye.
Colin?
Aye.
Aye.
And aye. Thank you.
8. Thank you, Ms. Bay.